Narasimha Rao. He had this guru in Vishakhapatnam, Shivanand Murthy, who was a police officer turned a guru. Narasimha Rao, as Prime Minister, used to refer to him as a guru. He once asked him, Guruji, what is going to happen to the Babri Masjid? And he shut his eyes and said, I don't see it there.
Ever we think that India is an island that, operates in silos, or that any premiership in this country operates in silos, this is a book that completely breaks that conception. Neerja Chowdhury is a veteran journalist. She's been political editor with the Indian Express and with many publications before that. I'm not going to go into a CV because much like with Shubha, I'd like to get to the essence of what Neerja Chowdhury has achieved. She's taken saturated events in India's history, pivotal events that all of us think we know everything about, and she has cast completely new light into the dramatis personae and into the motivations and circumstances that have shaped our country through these 6 extremely epochal events. She's taken 6 prime ministers and showed us with intimacy and with cinematic detail how decision-making happens in a democracy as vivid and large and complex as India. So while we have the public story, this is an insider story like never before. Hansal Mehta is sitting here, and I was thinking when I read this book that there are at least 60 movies, and I kid you not, in this one book. So I would urge all of you to read it. And the 6 prime ministers she's looked at are Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, VP Singh, Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh and Vajpayee. And she'll explain why she picked them and what are these pivotal incidents. What really came through for me was the amazing alchemy of circumstances, accidents, little pivots, and surprise relationships that really govern us and, as I said earlier, change us while we sleep and we don't know about it. Neerja Chowdhury is bringing that to us with dramatic urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Neerja on stage. Thank you, Neerja. We did have a session with Neerja in the Chennai edition of Ignition, and by popular demand, everyone said you have to have chapter 2 of Neerja Chowdhury. We've cheated Chennai because we're hosting it in Delhi, but it's wonderful to have you here. Neerja, you might want to just shift your chair a little bit this way so the audience gets to see you. Okay. So Neerja, like I said, this is a book of urgency, intimacy, absolute surprises, things that one has not really heard of. So I'm going to start with asking you, actually. You've been a political journalist for more than 40 years, I would say. But when you began to write this book, what were the really surprise insights that came to you? What was it that you also didn't know till you started putting this book together?
Before I answer that, what struck me about your program till now, the incredibly versatile Shoma Chaudhury, and the incredible diversity of Indian music that Shubha Mudgal represents.
Yeah.
And the third speaker, I don't know. I would look forward to hearing from. And again, I would say the incredible diversity of India that my book represents. You asked me what is my finding, what struck me. As a journalist, as a political journalist, while covering Indian politics, and I've covered, in the column I do in the Indian Express every week, which is called the Neerja Chowdhury column, it says, has covered 10 Lok Sabha elections. It makes me sound really, as you say, 40 years really is impressive. But every time I hit the road, and elections are due again, I am just simply amazed at India's diversity. Every 20 kilometers, the scene changes. The language is different, the food habits are different, the penawa is different. Of course, religion, caste, all that is there. And that I discovered anew while doing this book. Again, the incredible diversity represented by the prime ministers of India. As I've said, aristocratic, rustic, Brahmin, backward, woman, man. I mean, they represented all this. So, and again, it dawned on me, despite all the fault lines, despite all the problems that our democracy faces, that we have survived as a democracy and matured as a democracy for all its problems, that is an incredible thing to be proud of.
Absolutely, Neerja. And now I'm going to, almost like a television journalist, hustle you into the business of talking about your book, because there's so much to unroll. I wanted to start with the most unusual relationships that your book talks about, Neerja. There's such surprise. I don't know how many of you would know, but that Nehru actually was the first supporter of Vajpayee, or that, Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee were great friends, or that Harkrishan Surjit and Manmohan Singh, opposite ends of the political spectrum, were helping each other. So dive us into that first, Neerja. Pick any two of the most unlikely friendships that actually ended up shaping the country.
I would say again, our democracy is not just party democracy. It is that, of course. One party opposed to the another. But you have relationships across the political divide. Maybe because we're a feudal country, I don't know the answers, to why this is so. But when things get into a jam, then one political player will pick up the phone and talk to another. Let's find a way out. There is the ugly side there, the underbelly of all this also. So you've talked about, certainly, Jawaharlal Nehru noticed Vajpayee when he first became an MP in the mid-50s, 57. And he was so impressed by Vajpayee's oratory that he had sent a word to the Indian mission in the United States, asking the diplomats there, please introduce him to a wide spectrum of people. This man has promise. And when Khrushchev came to India in 1960, and Nehru did a banquet, hosted a banquet for him, and in the lineup, when Vajpayee came, he was invited. Nehru introduced him to Khrushchev. This is our future prime minister.
My God.
So it was a different world, I would say then. And Vajpayee and Narasimha Rao. Narasimha Rao was all set to go for a nuclear test in 1995. It had come to the T3 stage. He's given the go-ahead. And then the information leaked to the Americans, and he decided whether he got cold feet. He decided otherwise. The moment Vajpayee became prime minister, they met. And Narasimha Rao said, even though you may not get a majority, this is what worried Vajpayee, whether they'll be able to rustle together a majority in parliament. He said, you go ahead, because we are all ready for it. And the CTBT was, the sword of CTBT was hanging there. India had to test before that. Our leadership was aware of this. So Vajpayee couldn't do it because it was a 13-day government. But the moment he came back to power in 1998, he went in for the big bang. And then, very interestingly, this is the unseemly side. That is that in where was it? I think, I forget the year now. When Kalyan Singh was all, 1995, I think. When Kalyan Singh was all set to form government in Lucknow, and Narasimha Rao was in New York at the UNGA, and so was Vajpayee. They were sitting together. Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi, who was Narasimha Rao's MOS in the PMO, was sitting in between them. And Vajpayee turned to Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi and said, I want to come and meet him. So when can I do that? So he said, आप शाम को आ जाओ. So he said, शाम को तो बात नहीं होती है. Lekin, he said, why don't you speak to him now? So across Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi, he spoke to Narasimha Rao and said, Kalyan Singh is all set to become chief minister, usko banna nahi chahiye. Now, Kalyan Singh was a protege of L.K. Advani. And so Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi, when they went back to the hotel and he asked Narasimha Rao, kya karna hai? So he said, Vora ji se baat kar lo. Vora ji was governor of UP, so Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi called up Vora ji and said, ye nahi karna hai. So Vora said, he's sitting in my ante room, set to make a bid for CM-ship, to be invited. He said, bilkul nahi karna hai. And Kalyan Singh did not become the chief minister. Narasimha Rao knew what UP meant for Vajpayee. That was his turf. That is where his power came from. So they helped each other in this way. And also when when he was convicted, Narasimha Rao, Vajpayee did not proceed. He was prime minister then. He did not proceed against Narasimha Rao. So but that side also to this partnership.
Yeah, but interestingly then, Narasimha Rao actually pursued the Hawala investigation against Mr. Advani with great alacrity and ferocity, because that then undercut Advani and made space for Vajpayee to become prime minister. You know, so there was that level of Jugalbandi. It was odd to realize that Advani and Vajpayee weren't the real Jugalbandi, that Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee were. The other, you know, there are two for those of you who haven't read the book yet, there's 6 pivotal things which Neerja has brought up. One is the nuclear deal and the nuclear blast in Vajpayee's time, and we'll come back to that because it's like a Mishnah plot. But there are also the Shah Bano case in Rajiv Gandhi's time. It's Indira Gandhi coming back with power after the emergency. And with VP Singh, it's the Mandal Commission report, which completely changed the country. So we'll go through all of this. I'm going to come back to the nuclear deal and the full saga of that, Neerja. But I wanted to take us into slightly more personal, intimate insights first. With Indira Gandhi, it was a real surprise to find out how deeply religious she was, how superstitious she was, how vulnerable she was, even exactly at the time when the whole world was toasting her as the Iron Lady. You know, so would you share that anecdote about her, which actually brings her much closer to the BJP, you know, her worldview in terms of nationalism and religiosity than we possibly understand when we look at her public life. So give us some insights into her religious nature.
In 1966, Indira Gandhi was not like that. When she took oath as Prime Minister, she did it in the name of Constitution. In 1980, when she took oath as Prime Minister, it was the name of God. In between 1977, when she lost the elections and badly routed, she lost her own election. After that, she went to every major temple in the country. She was afraid that the Janta government would harm Sanjay, they may kill him. And she also used that politically because she had lost the support of the Muslims during the emergency because of enforced sterilizations. And she wanted to win over the Hindus. And she also reached out to the RSS. RSS reached out to her during the emergency and she to them. Now, not because she believed in RSS ideology, but as a ruler, she had to, you know, as many rulers do, know what the opponent is doing, what they're up to, what their strategy is, and so on. In 1980, when she won, she was going to Palampur, the Chamunda Devi temple. She believed in the Chamunda Devi and would send a lifafa of 100 rupees every second month. This would be taken to her and prasad used to be brought back to her. And it was fixed that she would go there on 22nd of June. But for some reason, she gave it a miss. She was to fly from Jammu, but she decided to go directly back to Delhi. On June 23, her group was there. The chief minister was there of Himachal Pradesh. They did the puja on the morning of 23rd. and they were headed back to Delhi. When 50 kilometers down the road, they heard that Sanjay Gandhi's plane had crashed. So they rushed back. At 2:30 a.m., they were back in Delhi. And these people from Mohan Meakin company that makes this famous rum.
Yeah.
Old Monk.
Yeah.
And so they rushed, this manager of the company she was sitting by Sanjay's body, and she took him aside and said, "Is this because I did not come to Chamunda?" 6 months later, she went to Chamunda. And the Pandit who had said, when she did not come, that Ma never forgives a ruler treating the goddess with contempt. Ma forgives ordinary people if they do it, but not rulers. That very Pandit, his hands shook when he did the puja. And they said Indira Gandhi did every mudra to perfection. Everything that she did that day was to perfection. And she just wept and wept and wept. And then she went out, she did the parikrama, she planted trees that Sanjay was very fond of. And she came back to Delhi that day, and that evening at a function, she invited Rajiv Gandhi to the stage and introduced him to the crowd.
Yeah. You know, that's a...
So that kind of a superstition. And I found, all of them, or not all of them, but certainly Narasimha Rao. He had this guru in Vishakhapatnam, Shivanand Murthy, who was a police officer turned a guru. Narasimha Rao, as Prime Minister, used to refer to him as a guru. He once asked him, "Guruji, what is going to happen to the Babri Masjid?" And he shut his eyes and said, "I don't see it there."
I don't see it there.
And that deeply affected Narasimha Rao. Now, whether it had a bearing on his decision, I don't know. But the prime ministers were, some of them were very superstitious, and the instability, the luck factor playing a role in what happened, I suppose, brought them to this pass.
Yeah, I'm going to go deeper into that. But, when you mentioned Narasimha Rao and the Guruji that had a big Tirtha, who had a big impact on him, again, it's the sheer amalgamation of forces that shaped or influences that shaped Narasimha Rao is again a mirror of India, because he was shaped by the communist movement. He was shaped by this religious figure. His Brahmanism was a big factor in his life. And then the strangest story that I found in your book was that Narasimha Rao was a gun runner fighting the Nizam. That's the
kind of... He was a gun runner. He was supplying arms at that time against the Nizam's movement. And certainly the leftist forces, the socialist forces, when he became chief minister in 1971, he went in for land reforms, very dramatic, radical land reforms, as a result of which the landed lobbies got against him, and he had to be moved out and president's rule was declared. But later on, of course, there was the Brahminical side of him. One of the reasons people said he was very friendly with Vajpayee. The bond between them was also the Brahminical bond. But he said, somebody said, talk to him about a challenge. And he turned around and said, "Remember, I'm a Brahmin." And he was a Niyogi Brahmin who was supposed to be very astute politically, which he was. So Narasimha Rao did a lot of things, very futuristic things, opened up the economy, look east policy, turned to the Central Asian republics after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the world becoming a unipolar world. And yet there was the Babri Masjid, a non-decision as a result of which the mosque came down. Until today, we don't know the people who were responsible.
Yeah. So, Neerja, since we're with Narasimha Rao, and I'd still like to go back to this, this religiosity and how it's played out. But since we're with Narasimha Rao, nobody has sued you for this book. So clearly, and you've been talking to prime ministers, to sources, to government sources. It's rich with almost first person, it has that. So clearly your sources are very strong. But it came as a shock to me that you could write in the book that Narasimha Rao when the Babri Masjid fell, actually said, "Ye to hona tha." Good it happened. When Shah Bano happened, he said, "Let the Muslims rot in the gutters if they don't want to be so modern." We forget that when Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, he was home minister. He seems to have let the Sikh riots happen. And then after, when Babri Masjid was being pulled down, he alerted the army, but he did not call in the army. So, and as I said, no one has challenged you on these facts, but how did you get to know these things about him and speak of it with such authority? And these are shocking facts, really.
These are all different people who talk to me. And I suppose I'm fortunate to have been trusted by people who talk frankly. And this thing that you're talking about is 2-3 days after the demolition, when 4 journalists went to see him. And they were led by Nikhil Chakravarti, a very eminent figure who edited the mainstream magazine. And he was a friend of Narasimha Rao, had known him, and Narasimha Rao trusted him to talk frankly to him. So he said to him, he said, we heard you were doing puja while the masjid was being brought down. At that day, those of you who are older will remember in 1992 December, there was this big buzz that the Prime Minister was either sleeping or doing puja when the mosque was being brought down. So Narasimha Rao was stung. He said, "Dada," that's the way he addressed Nikhil Chakravarti. "I'm not new in Rajniti. I've done Rajniti all my life. I allowed this to happen so that this Mandir issue could be taken out of the BJP's hands, and it had fueled its politics." These were words to that effect. So certainly, and later, BJP leaders and RSS leaders told other MPs who told me that they had said that they had alerted Narasimha Rao that this might happen on that day and to be prepared for any eventuality. Now, in Narasimha Rao's thinking, this was a festering sore on India's body politic. Its removal might take the wind out of the BJP's sails. And in some ways, during his premiership, Mandir went on the back burner. And he won elections even 1 year down the line. But Hindu nationalism came to rise in a way, as we have seen, and shaped our politics for the decades that followed. The same with Rajiv Gandhi's politics. His response to the Shah Bano judgment shaped the politics of the decades that followed.
So, Neerja, let me take you into this decision-making, and all this cast of characters that end up impacting prime ministers. So one, we've been examining a little bit about these unlikely friendships. Another one was with Manmohan Singh, with Amar Singh, where Amar Singh said, "You all think that he did the nuclear deal, George Bush and I did the nuclear deal," right? So that's a great story that I'd love you to talk about. And then
Manmohan Singh, you never think of Manmohan Singh as... he was probably considered the weakest amongst the weakest prime ministers India has had. Sonia Gandhi was the power behind the throne. She was half prime minister. But on this one issue of the Indo-US nuclear deal, Manmohan Singh simply did not give up. 39 long months, he did not give up. And he saw it through. Of course, he had the backing of the most powerful man in the world, the US President George Bush, and they enjoyed a rare chemistry. Of course, chemistry is not the only thing that shapes decisions of countries, but when it became rough, Bush really went out of his way, and as I said, Manmohan Singh was dogged. And he used every trick in the book, Shoma, what you're talking about. The Sam, Dam, Dand, Bed, getting the fixers on board, internationally, nationally, and Amar Singh, this very colorful character in Indian politics, who was a liaison officer in the Birlas and rose to become a MP and very powerful figure in the Samajwadi Party. And Manmohan Singh won him over. The Samajwadi Party was not supporting the nuclear deal. The left parties had threatened to withdraw support. They were against it, and they did. And Samajwadi Party was brought on board to support the government so that it did not fall, and the nuclear deal went through. And Amar Singh was a character, he hated to be called a fixer. If any of us wrote using that term, he would get very, very angry. He thought of himself in a class apart, internationally. He knew the Clintons very well. He brought Bill Clinton to Lucknow on a visit. He was, he's one of those very colorful characters that require a book or something on him.
So, Neerja, I was hoping you would share that anecdote before we move into some of the, more points.
He's the one who said this.
Yeah.
He said to a journalist, he said to Sanjay Baru, in fact, he said, who do you think was responsible for the Indo-US nuclear deal? You will say George Bush and Dr. Manmohan Singh. No, it is George Bush and Amar Singh. And he was right. If he had not bailed out the government.
Yeah, because the left pulled out. And again, a lovely detail in your book that the BJP actually offered Mulayam Singh the chief ministership of UP if he would not back Manmohan Singh. And whatever hold Amar had on everybody in his life, Mulayam Singh actually refused that and still supported Manmohan Singh. But I was hoping you'd share that wonderful, colorful anecdote in your book, which will surely turn up in a movie one day, where there was this phone call to Sanjay Baru from a hospital in America. And somebody said, I'm a friend of Amar Singh, and tell Dr. Manmohan Singh that the doctors in America are very good, very kind, wonderful, and wish him a speedy recovery, which was a coded message to tell Manmohan Singh that the SP was going to stand by him,
That's right.
That's out of a Hindi movie.
That's right, absolutely right.
So, Neerja, I want to take you to the other very poignant, I would say, strain in your book, which is that a lot of these prime ministers, the decisions that they made actually hinged on small pivots and on very close relationships that were either fractured, had become hostile. The closest relationships ended up becoming the most toxic relationships. So, maybe you could run us through 2-3 of them. Sanjay Gandhi for Indira Gandhi, Arun Nehru for Rajiv Gandhi, Advani and Vajpayee. It was so tragic to see that Advani did not know when the nuclear bomb went off, and he was so bitter about Vajpayee. So talk about these 3 relationships.
I was thinking, in fact, this morning, how such big doors swing on little hinges. Now, Indira Gandhi was disqualified. There was a court judgment, 12th of June, 1975. Raj Narayan had contested against her, lost in the earlier elections, and gone to court. And the court ruled against her, disqualified her. And that led to her declaring the emergency 2 weeks later. Very small thing, a court judgment. Come to Rajiv Gandhi. He takes over 4 months down the line in 1985, April. Again, there's a court judgment. This is the kind of judgment that comes every day in dozens of courts. What is the judgment? To give maintenance to a divorced Muslim woman with 5 children because her husband is not giving her anything.
Neerja, because people will know what Shahbano's thing is, so I wanted you to dive more into the relationships and how.
So then third one, VP Singh. I'll just say the little pivots and I'll come back to yours. One Sarkari report that's sitting there in a dusty almara, Mandal Commission report, which Indira Gandhi had put away. Committee had been formed. Committee sat on it. 9 years it outlived Indira Gandhi. And it brought about a change, Mandal Commission, which it's irreversible change that we see. It's changed the face of India. But the relationship, the political jodis that you're talking about, that have been fascinating. Sanjay Gandhi and Indira Gandhi. Sanjay Gandhi, responsible for the emergency, or was the extra constitutional authority during the emergency, even took decisions that mother did not know about. So he was held responsible for the defeat of the Congress party in 1977 because of his actions. And he's the one who's held responsible by his mother for her victory in 1980. a fascinating character, one of those tough characters of Indian politics. The second tough character, Arun Nehru. Third cousin of Rajiv Gandhi, was the man who maneuvered the situation in such a way that on 31st October 1984, when Indira Gandhi was assassinated, that Rajiv was sworn in within hours at 7 o'clock in the evening, all due to the machinations and planning of Arun Nehru. And Arun Nehru was virtually seen as the most powerful man after the Prime Minister in the first months of Rajiv Gandhi's. Very tough, very tough. And I've listed, how he dealt with journalists. If you went to see him, there'll be only one chair, and he would talk to them dismissively. People feared him.
But he's the one who actually advised Rajiv Gandhi to, after the Shah Bano judgment, he's the one who advised him to open the locks. He was responsible for, he wanted uniform civil code. He wanted to abrogate 370. So it's amazing how many...
He said, this is interesting also. He's the one, when when this judgment came, Muslims were up in arms. So Rajiv went in for the Muslim Women Bill to undo the judgment. And then the Hindus were up in arms. So Rajiv got the locks at the Babri Masjid open to allow unfettered worship to the Hindus, because this was disputed structure. Now this advice was given to Rajiv by Arun Nehru. And Arun Nehru told Rajiv, do you think you became Prime Minister in just like that? 5,006 were killed. He used the figure 5,000. There's dispute on the figure, but 5,006 were killed. And there was a Hindu consolidation against that. That's the reason why you were elected. Then he says, if you want to be in power, you'll have to do three things. You'll have to build a Ram temple in Ayodhya. You will have to abrogate 370, giving special status to Kashmir. And you will have to bring in uniform civil code. The three core agendas of the BJP that it is followed.
But it's fascinating. That plays out again and again, because Indira Gandhi also said that she wanted Kashi and Mathura, to be built. And then Narasimha Rao in 1991, he said it was in the Congress manifesto to allow the temple to be built. And again,
Narasimha Rao, he got a trust, after the Babri Masjids were demolished, he got a trust registered of all the major Hindu sects around the country. And the idea was to build a temple at that very spot. But at the last minute, Mandir has ceased to be an issue. So he said, "Agli baar power mein aayenge, to we will do it." So the point is, the essential point that this brings up, it was not Mandir per se, it was politics and power. Mandir was only a tool. Yeah. And that religion is only a tool, caste is only a tool. So one of the things, I will say, not because I'm a cynic, but the essential trigger for decision making in India at the top is survival. To wrest power, to retain power. And every Prime Minister, I would say, they've had flashes of wisdom, but there has been, as I say, this underbelly of Indian politics. Power for the sake of power. And it really started with Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
This degeneration. She rose to great heights, but also this degeneration of power for the sake of power.
Yeah. We'll need to wrap up pretty soon. So I just want you to touch on two aspects. One, VP Singh, who we haven't spoken about. And I want to take you back to his childhood, which again was a surprise in your book. The DNA of the kind of Prime Minister he became was actually sowed in his childhood. It shaped his temperament. So do share that with the audience. And why it played out in public life as it did.
His family came from his father, and would marry 3 Ranis, and VP Singh was the son of the 3rd Rani. This was the Dahiya state, and his father gave him in adoption to a nearby state of Manda, whose Raja did not, who was who didn't have a family. He'd lost his family and wife. So he wanted to adopt this child. So VP, from the age of 5 to 10, had a very unhappy childhood. He himself said, I was very, very insecure, and that made him a loner. So also with Narasimha Rao, he was given an adoption to a couple to enable them to keep their property, which otherwise, without having a child, would have been taken away by the state. He too was a loner. He too did not need a coterie. He didn't let his left hand know what the right hand was doing. So yes, early experiences in childhood, as we all know, shape politicians also, as all of us, very, very deeply.
So, Neerja, to go international now for a moment, that there was one other character that has really shaped the reality that we have. Right now, after G20, we're getting closer to the US. We almost look, we're actually on the same table. We are looked at as a big global power. And actually, the hinge, the pivot person there was Condoleezza Rice, and there's a fascinating story again in your book where she sits up at 3 o'clock in the morning and activates the entire international circuit. The deal was going to fall through, and she actually saves it. So do share that story, because, again, we think of her as, in the Iraq war, somebody that's been a very harmful person as well in global history. But for India, she ended up being really great.
Yeah, Condi Rice, when she was first the National Security Advisor in first term, and then Secretary of State in the second term of George Bush, and she was convinced that India had to be viewed very differently and not parity given with Pakistan, which was the traditional way that India was being viewed. And she wrote this, and she prepared a note for George Bush: great powers don't just let things happen. And she saw India as a counterpoint to China in this region. And with that evening, when the deal had just gone through and not gone through,
collapsed,
and Dr. Manmohan Singh said, now we'll just have 2 lines in the joint statement referring to the Indo-US nuclear deal. She got up early in the morning and she went to see Natwar Singh, who was the External Affairs Minister, woke him up at 6 o'clock. He said, I was still in my dressing gown, and she walked in. And then she said, why won't your Prime Minister see him? So she said, because he doesn't want to say no to you. So she said, what are your reservations? So she convinced him to call Manmohan Singh immediately. So Manmohan Singh finally called her, and Manmohan Singh then called the nuclear scientists who had gone with them and said, what are your objections? So on this, paper napkin, Kakotkar wrote, exactly what the objections were. This paper napkin was shown to Condi Rice, and she said, we will take care of this. And finally, I'm cutting it very short, but it has very interesting dramatic turns. The joint statement came through. And that was the basis of the nuclear deal between the 2 countries. And not just the nuclear deal, which meant nuclear commerce for India, clean energy, but it meant a strategic partnership between the United States of America and India, which is going ahead now.
Right. So, as I said, Neerja's book has 60 films in it, so we can't really get into all of it. But coming back to Arun Nehru, I just wanted to ask you that if this is true, then it is deeply disturbing. It's in your book that when Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, there was already talk of Sikhs being, the whole city was on fire. And Arun Nehru called Narasimha Rao and said, you're the Home Minister, but you don't have to take care of this. This will be handled from the PMO. And so actually that ball sits with Arun Nehru. Is that something that, who did you hear that from? Because that is chilling and a grisly fact, that someone so close to Rajiv Gandhi actually said that.
I heard from one of the, people who've written about Vinay Sitapari, who had spoken to the official who was in the room when this call came at 6 o'clock on 31st October, after Indira Gandhi's assassination. Arun Nehru on the line and virtually saying, you back off, and that the PM will now take charge. And Narasimha Rao, even though, Rajiv had not yet been sworn in, So there was a whole gap of that 1 hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. And Narasimha Rao didn't do anything. At that time, the violence had started. There was demand that army be called out immediately. But then, of course, that didn't happen. And we know the following 3 days till the last rites were held and undertaken, the violence that took place in Delhi. Many of us are witness to that, and all over North India. Something that India is going to take a long time to live down. What happened in those 3 days.
So, again, that's indicative of the kind of ancillary characters that end up shaping, and the burdens prime ministers
and I
bear.
know, at that time, I was at the All India Institute, that whole day I was there, and I know Congress leaders who sent out instructions and said, Maro Salon ko. So it was a very well planned and very cynical to bring about a Hindu consolidation.
So again, it's a reminder how many times the army, super efficient, has been there, whether the Gujarat riots, Punjab riots, Sikh riots, and that people in power have just, like you said, that decision making which has so many wheels within wheels, and it's not done. I just wanted to end with another facet in your book, which is the loneliness of all these prime ministers. There are wonderful vignettes in Neerja's book that each of these prime ministers, Nehru sitting under a camphor tree, refusing to speak, Narasimha Rao sitting next to his hospital bed, refusing to eat, VP Singh saying that I wrote history, but all I want now is an erasure. And so each of them, you kind of point to the extreme loneliness, like Indira Gandhi saying that all through my life, we didn't know who would be alive and who would be arrested. So beneath this, cutthroat politics, there's also the burden of being human and the vulnerability, which your big book.
And the loneliness. And, because there is a realization at the end of the day, the enormity of the decision that the Prime Minister is about to take, and the millions of lives that it is going to affect, and they were aware of this. Of course, apart from the fact that you don't have any personal life, as VP Singh said, or Vajpayee said, the higher you go, the lonelier it becomes. And he said, I don't know why I strayed into politics. I should have stuck to poetry. But Nehru, who made use of this lonely spells, wrote so many books while in jail. And Indira Gandhi also put it to use in the sense that she would be very standoffish and aloof when people went to see her. So you were figuring out what does she mean when she does this or that. And Narendra Modi, who's really put it to use. You see Narendra Modi alone, if he's coming down Air India 1, you will see no official, no minister behind him, alone. If you have Sardar Patel statue and Narendra Modi in front of it, alone. He goes to South Africa in a train, you see him alone. Kedarnath cave, alone for those 17 hours. The message is very clear. Main hoon na.
Well, so Neerja, that's a good note to end on. We could go on. We were talking about the religious aspect that, again, these are little details that when Operation Blue Star was happening, Indira Gandhi had the Mahamrityunjay mantra going on. When she was making an alliance with Raj Narayan, she actually had her house cleaned because she thought Jadoo Tona is going on. You laugh at these things, but it's also indicative of the vulnerability that they're feeling.
And the humanity of it all at the end of the day.
Yes.
They're as human as anybody else.
And Raj Narayan came out of emergency in jail and called up an astrologer. Rajiv Gandhi called up an astrologer or Tantrik who told him bring down the VP Singh government. So like Neerja said, there are many things that create the public decisions that we all live with. But thank you very, very much, Neerja. This is just a jhalak into your book. We'll see this play out in many OTT series. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.